This video tutorial will provide a brief introduction in modeling a multi-story structure in Adapt Builder 2018. So we're going to start with the splash screen. We can see the new splash screen for Builder 2018. In the splash screen we have a drop-down tab which allows us to select the different components or modules and programs that we're going to be using for the instance of use in Builder 2018, and you can see the line here will state what programs you're currently in. So if I was to launch the program will open in this state, and we can see we're opened in Modeler, PTRC, Shop Drawing, and US Units. If I go to the arrow down, I'll select Edge, Floor Pro, and this will dynamically change here. So we're going to do PTRC design scope. For example, I'll turn off the shop drawing module and the PTRC module, and we'll use US units, and we'll select OK. Having selected OK in the splash screen, we'll enter the graphical interface or the user interface in the program. And we're going to familiarize you with a couple of new features in version 2018. At the top we have what I'll call the upper quick access bar. This includes things like new, open, save, undo, redo, and then print. And we can select this drop down to customize and add additional options here. You'll notice that the new UI is ribbon based, so the thought process in laying this new ribbon-based UI out was to have it be a linear, contextualized set of ribbons that allow the user to work from left to right, and you might be coming back over to some of the tabs, for example, for visibility or modify, to change criteria and so on. But each of the ribbons has tool panels, and those tool panels contain tools. So if you're ever referencing documentation, usually you'll see that the layering of a reference to a specific tool is usually ribbon, panel, tool, or we might call out a ribbon name and then show the panel and the tool. So for example, criteria, this is the ribbon, material properties is the panel, and if I wanted to set up fiber properties, I would select this to set up my fiber properties using this option to add a fiber material. You'll notice also at the top right we have what is referenced in older versions of the program, the Story Manager set of tools. So we have the level assignment, and you'll notice when I hover over a tool that there's a new tooltip that's shown that kind of describes what the tool is. If you select the drop down for any tool panel, the program will describe these tooltips if there's more detail necessary for the description. So you can always access that for a deeper description of a particular tool within a panel. Again, up at the upper right we have active level up and down. That just navigates vertically through the structure when you have more than one level that you're working on. For example, in multi-level mode we have single level mode and then multi-level mode. This was previously called full structure mode. It's shown here as multi-level mode. The help menu just contains necessary information like documentation about Adapt, about Builder. This contains the version that we're using. Here you can see this is still showing 17. This is and the help menu contains things like documentation about Adapt, about Builder, technical support, and the disclaimer. At the lower or the bottom of the graphical modeling screen or window, we also have what I'll call the lower quick access toolbar, and this contains all of your snap tools. So this is the location for snap tools and grid settings in the program. We also have some quick access for top view, side view, or front view, 3D, top, front, right. This is an isometric view, zoom extents, and then we have specific drawing tools that are expandable here. This is default display, so what was previously shown as blue eyeglasses with the on-off symbol, the sun symbol, this now is the new symbol for default display. You have access to select set view items. This is also shown in the visibility panel as view settings. So that will open the select set view items dialog window for control of visibility of components. Result display settings is the same window that you see here. And then finally we have the solid modeler, the view model tool, the teapot, layer settings, and item properties. We show the coordinates of the cursor, unit system, level, this is the active level, and the active layer. And you can always right click here to turn things off or on this lower status bar. This is also known as the status bar, the bottom, and then you have a set of quick access tools also. So the purpose again of this particular of this video is to really show just kind of an example of how we go about setting up a model with loads, gravity, and lateral in the program. We're not going to go in to the extent of analyzing and full design. Those will be carried out in supplemental videos for the version. This is more meant to show the ease of modeling in the new interface. So we're going to start with a Revit file, and I'll go over here to the File menu, and we're going to import. And you'll notice that IMP allows us to import files from Revit, from eTabs, from Tekla Structural Designer, and from other builder files. So we're going to select IMP, and I'll go ahead and navigate over to the location where I want to select the IMP file. And we'll use this file here called m1.imp. This will open the import options window. We're going to just create a new model with all levels. I have no loads nor load combinations, so we'll say OK. And the program will import that model. And we can see if I use some of the new ribbon and tool locations, if I wanted to go to a side view, for example, I could go to Home, Zoom Camera, and I could select an option for side view. Or I could go down at the bottom. Let's say I want to look at a 3D view. That's kind of a standard view you might use, and that's also shown here in the Zoom camera. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to add a few more levels to this structure. So and we're going to do a few manipulations of what's currently in the structure. So before we add the new levels, we'll first go into single level mode. Remember, that's at the top right. And I'm going to navigate down in sequence vertically. And you'll notice I have these walls that go from this bottom level, and there's a massive offset vertically. So I'll just double click on the wall, go to location, and I'll set that offset to 0. So there was a mistake in the Revit file in what was imported back into Builder. And I will set that offset back to 0. If I navigate vertically, you can see those walls on the sides of this opening are no longer there. So I'm going to copy those walls vertically, and I'm going to copy those up several times. You can see they're still, let's say, up to level. We're going to copy those up to level 7. So I'll copy them 6 times vertically. And I can also go to level assignment and just select level 1, say set as active. And you might notice that this dialog has changed. We've reorganized some of the options here for adding or applying a new level height, applying a new plane, and deleting a plane. So there's options there for being able to add or delete planes within this sequential floor arrangement. We'll select active for level 1. I'm going to select these 2 walls just by control and pick select using my cursor, and I want to vertically replicate these. So I'm going to modify, and I'm going to use the copy and move panel, and I'm going to use vertical. And we're going to copy these up 6 times. Okay, we just copy them up 6 times. When we copy something, even though we're in single level mode, it's still going to show the entire set of copied components. So if I go back to multi-level mode, you can see that those walls are now shown with everything on in view in the structure. Okay, I'm going to go back to visibility, or excuse me, home, and I'm going to show a side view, and we'll do we're actually wanting to do the front view here. So I'm going to add a few more levels, and I'm going to copy these two upper levels vertically 3 times. So we're going to go back to level assignment. You'll notice I can also get to level assignment from model. So we have wizards, levels, grid lines, section types. This is for column design and adding structural components and so on, and supports. So we'll go to Story Manager, and I'll go here to level 7, and I'm going to add 3 levels, and I'll change the name here to make it consistent with what we currently have. We'll say this is level 8. I need to apply that. This is level 9 and level 10. And I'll say close. And again, if I navigate vertically, I can select also this option for multi-level. I'm going to copy this set of components vertically 3 times. So I'll select that set of components. If I go to a 3D view again, you can see it's also copied through that plane in the XY direction. I'm just not seeing it when I'm looking at the front view. So to copy and move, again, we'll go back to Modify, and we're going to select Vertical. We're going to copy this up 3 times. Okay, so we're going to add a few levels to the structure. We're now going to set our support conditions at the base of the structure. So when we imported the model, we had a slab on ground. We don't want that to be included in the model, so I'll select and delete that. And if we go back to model, and I'm actually going to set this down to the base level, and then I'll go back to a plan view. So to go to plan view, I can use lower quick access, or I can go back to home and select the option for top view. I'm calling it plan view. So the next thing we're going to do is under model, we're going to select the option for supports. We're going to add supports. Technically, you don't need to do this because the program will use the default criteria for supports in the analysis and design options. From criteria, analysis and design options, you can see that the program will use these support conditions when the program analyzes or when we generate supports for the model, which we'll do now. And when I'm in multi-level mode, the program will actually use fix support. So I want to make sure that I'm actually in multi-level mode. My or the way that I add the supports is, again, back in model. If we use this option for create supports, the program will automatically generate the supports. And you can see when I did that, if I was to do that again, the supports flashed off and on. So to show the visibility of the supports, I can go over here to the visibility tab and just go ahead and use the point support display and line support display. And you can see that those are shown graphically. If I go to a side view, I'll go back to home, go back to my view here. You can see those supports are shown at the base of the structure. And to create larger symbols for the supports, I'll go to the visibility ribbon, and we'll select view settings under finite element for line and point supports. I'm going to bump this up, let's say, to 22 inches. Say OK, and now I have larger representation of those supports. Okay, so we have our supports. We'll go now to criteria, and we're going to set up just general criteria for the concrete components. If I select criteria, you can see that there's a secondary window panel to the right. This is meant for the use of fiber reinforced concrete. So if you have still fibers in the concrete using Dramix FRC, that will become active. We're not using, this is regular concrete in this instance, so we're going to add a couple of new concrete properties, we're going to call this slabs and beams, and we'll call this columns and walls. Slabs and beams, we're going to use 5,000 psi, and for columns and walls, I'll modify this, let's say, to 6,000. You can add as many assigned materials here as you want for concrete. So to assign these to the components, we're going to select the components. Now, to select these, I can try to window select all of my slabs and beams. This becomes a little bit tedious because you have to very carefully select each of the components, or I can go back to Home, select by type, and just select beam and slab. And I want to modify these components, more than one component, so I can go to Modify, Modify Selection. And this allows me to set the material to slab and beams for those selected components. And then I will do the same for the columns and walls. So we'll use Select by Type, Columns, and Wall. And we're going to go back to Modify, Selection. And you can see we'll go over here to Columns and Walls. Okay, so the material is set for the concrete. We could also go in and set criteria or material settings for mild steel, pre-stressing if we have post-tensioning in the model, and then again for fiber, that takes us back to this material setting where we would add fiber here. That also lists what we just added for concrete, and then also if we needed to define a generic material, we could define that here. Okay, for design criteria, we're just going to set the design code based on whatever design code we are designing to. So this is set to ACI 2011. This will open the panel that you select inside of this design criteria tool panel. So for example, if I go to shear design, it's going to open up shear design. You could also navigate within any other tab once you open an instance of this panel. So you don't technically need to go back each time to select one of the tools. This is just for quick access for that specific tool. And we're not going to set those up in this particular video. So the next thing we want to do is set our loading. So we're going to go ahead under loading, and for load cases, this is currently set to dead load. This is superimposed dead load and unreduced live load. We're going to just use those as the load cases for the video. You have the option to add as many additional load cases as you want, and you can rename those using this option here for label. Notice also that we do have the ability to set temperature and shrinkage loading in the program, so you could add those as needed for your design or your analysis. Building loads are reserved for lateral loads, and we'll look at seismic and wind here in just a moment. So we're going to focus on gravity. Load combinations, the program will evaluate just a default set of combinations. So for creating combinations that include both gravity and lateral, the user would need to enter combinations here, or you can import an IMP file that contains combinations that have already been created in another model for Adapt Builder, and I'll show you that process. So we'll go ahead now and add some loads. So I'm going to add loads using the patch load wizard and the line load wizard. We're going to select again by type all of our slabs, and this is a pretty simple example only because we're assuming that all of the slabs have the same amount of load on it. So obviously there are other tools that can be used to do more customized application of gravity loads in the program. But we'll go to patch load wizard. The program will map loads to the selected slabs, and I'll just say this is 20 PSF, and that will display our loads. If I use show loads, this turns loads off and on. I'll do that again by selecting by type all of my slabs. I'll go back to loading, and using the wizard again, we're going to use let's say 0.04, so 40 PSF. for live load. So we've added 20 dead, 40 live. We'll add perimeter loading around the slab perimeter by using the line load wizard. That does require us to select the slabs again. And I'll go back to loading. Under line load wizard, we'll say this is a dead load and it's 350 pounds per foot. And that created 134 line loads in the model. So we have all of the line loads. Again, I can show all of the loads off or on using this tab. To control, individual load cases or load types, we can use the blue eyeglasses under visibility. You can also access it quickly by selecting it here. And if I go to loads, I can isolate the type of load and what load case I want to see shown there. Okay, so we have gravity load. The last thing we're going to do in this video is we're going to just apply the building loads and then look for additional videos where we go into analysis and then specific floor and component design. So we'll now go up to loading again. I'm going to add wind load using the wizard. So the wind load wizard allows me to create wind in any direction really relative to the global axis orientation. So this is in the 0 degree direction, which is positive X. I could also include torsional effects, and I can include the orthogonal direction. So here we're going to apply wind in the X, the Y, and then we're going to apply the moments, the twisting based on this eccentricity 15% relative to the directions X and Y. And we'll use ASCE 7 as the generation expressions for generating the different wind pressures on the structure. So we'll say the basic wind speed is 115. We'll leave the other settings as they are. The program will update the wind pressures, which are converted to forces, shown here, windward and leeward forces. And you can user define or override those by selecting user define and going in and overriding them. Once I have set up my wind load cases, you can see the program will produce building load cases P0, M0, P90, M90, and I'll apply those. And the program will show those loads on the structure. So if I go to a 3D view, you can see this is the entire set of wind loads which are applied as external loads on the structure. And again, something that is useful for validating or checking the loads that have been applied is to use the blue eyeglasses. And here I'll just deselect and reselect line load, and we're going to look at wind P0, for example. So this is the set of wind loads on the structure in the X direction. And you can see if I go to single level mode, I have a windward load, and that's shown here as wind P0 with an X value, X1 and X2. That's just a uniform line load. And then I also have on the opposite slab edge a leeward load. And these loads on the slabs now, this set of loads for wind P0, for example, can now be included as part of a load combination. So you can see those are listed here as individual loads. Now, the program currently does not generate the set of load combinations necessary to meet the ASE load cases 1 through 4, but we can again set those up in one model and then easily import those load cases to a separate model and then save that as a template. Before we do that, we're going to go ahead and select Seismic Load Wizard, and I'll just set up a couple of seismic load cases. We'll call this EQX. We'll leave these as is, but this is fairly standard in terms of generating lateral static forces per the load generation tool ASCE 7. The seismic mass, which is used to distribute the forces at nodes for both the force and the moments, is shown here. You can edit the mass to include other loads like dead load or live load. If you select edit, we're going to apply that, and that will store that information. Then I'll change this to Y, let's say, and I'll apply this. This is not all inclusive of the load cases you would need to evaluate a structure. You may need to apply this in different directions with plus or minus eccentricities. So this is just showing a couple of load cases. And again, if I go back to load cases, those are stored as building loads. Now I've saved an IMP file that contains load combinations that are necessary for evaluation of a structure per ACI or ASCE 7, which is referenced also in IBC. So if we go back to the File menu and I import an IMP file, I'm going to go ahead and navigate to the location of that file. And we'll go over here to this location. This is called Master Loading ACI. I'll say Open. And in this case, I want to update our model. I don't want to create a new model, and I'll deselect the components. I'll import none of the load cases, but I will import all of my load combinations. And we'll say OK. And this tells us that we have a combination that already exists in the model. Do we want to override and replace it? We'll say yes. I'll go back and just show the model. And going back to load combos, you can see that the load combination list grew from 5 to 200 plus combinations. Now, as a warning, depending on the complexity of the model and how large the model is, the processing of this many combinations can be very, very time consuming, and in some cases it may push the limits of the physical memory on a computer. So if you don't have enough memory, and if you have so many nodes and shell elements in a model, you may not be able to run a model with this many combos. It depends on the performance of the computer. So it's wise to run and analyze only the number of combinations you need for whatever evaluation you're doing. For example, if you're designing a PT floor and you're sizing post-tensioning, you may not need to run all of the load combinations that include lateral loads. You may only need to look at service level gravity load combinations. So that you should be prudent in how you set up combinations and what combinations you are running for a given instance of the program. But you can see that this now includes combinations which reference all of our wind load cases, ultimate limit states, and also service limit states. Now, once you have a set of combinations that might be a standard set that you would use for a given project, we can set that as a template file. And I'll go back to my File menu, and I'll say Save this as a project template. And I want to save everything here except for, let's say we only want to save load combinations. We want to deselect criteria and material. And I'll just call this ACI 2014 ASCE 7 combos as my template. And that will point to an Adapt Templates folder. This folder can be placed anywhere. It can be placed on a network drive, a local drive, and we'll just name this example 1. If I save this model, and let's say I want to create a new model, I'll go here to New. I'm going to create it based on that template file. So I'll select EX1, I'll create, and we'll save those changes. When I open that template file and I navigate back to load combos, those combinations are now stored as part of that template file. So the process of setting up the combinations for processing and analysis, it can be time consuming, once or twice, but once you have it in place, then you can replicate it very easily in the program. That will conclude this video tutorial. Look for more video tutorials coming up for Builder 2018 that will involve floor design, column design, and wall design. Thank you.